Hey guys, and welcome to the Red Haired Stokey podcast. Thanks to everyone that's listened so far, everyone that's subscribed, everyone that's supported it. I really do appreciate it. We're on season 2, episode 5 now, and the episode I've got for you today, I think is quite an interesting one. I don't think many of you will have heard of this before. I certainly hadn't before I researched it. So yeah, I'm going to go straight into it. So, did you know that the UK's ambulance service started in Burslem in Stoke-on-Trent? In 1874, Hiram Syson, a Crimean War veteran and town hall caretaker, became England's very first ambulance man. Operating from Burslem Town Hall, Sison ran the country's first organised civilian ambulance service, years before any official training body or brigade had even been formed. This is a local story with national importance, and it began on the streets of Burslem and helped lay the foundation for the modern ambulance service that we know today. From war hero to public servant, Hiram's journey is one of duty, compassion and innovation, and it all started right here, in the heart of the Potteries. Hiram Syson was born on the 22nd of February 1833 in Derbyshire. His father, Isaac Sison, was an agricultural labourer, and his mother Elizabeth raised their children in rural surroundings. By the time of the 1841 census, the Sison family had moved to Wollerton near Nottingham. He was one of several children, John, Hannah, Ruth and Anne, and the move to Wollerton placed the family closer to growing industrial centres, although they still lived modestly by agricultural means. By the age of 18, in 1851, Hiram left home and enlisted with the 47th Regiment of Foot in Coventry. This decision marked the beginning of a life shaped by discipline, duty, and eventually public service. His enlistment brought him into the ranks of the British Army during a time of growing tensions abroad. Not long into his service, Hiram transferred to the 57th Regiment of Foot. They were famously known as the Diehards for their bravery under fire. In 1854, the Crimean War broke out, and Hiram's regiment was deployed. On the 14th of September 1854, he landed in Crimea as part of the 4th Infantry Division under Lieutenant General Sir George Cathcart. He saw action at the Battle of Alma on the 20th of September, just days after arrival, then came to Balaclava on the 25th of October, famous for the charge of the Light Brigade, and Inkerman on the 5th of November, where Hiram fought in bitter and chaotic hand-to-hand combat. As the brutal winter of 1854-55 set in, he likely took part in the siege of Sebastopol. While official records don't confirm this directly, the 4th bar on his Crimean Medal indicates his presence. Although Hiram was awarded the Crimean Medal with 4 bars, a notable honour recognising the hardship and bravery of those in prolonged combat. After Crimea, his regiment was sent to Malta in June 1856, and later ordered to India to help suppress the Indian Rebellion of 1857. However, it is believed that Hiram returned to Britain before this deployment, likely due to injury or completion of his overseas duty. And by 1859 he was stationed at Peterborough. In January 1860, aged 26 and a serving soldier, he married Eliza Timms, a 20-year-old woman from Whittlesea in the Cambridgeshire Fens. This was a small rural village, and many families struggled to survive on rural wages. So the Timms family moved around quite a lot. Councilmen or recruitment agents would appear in Whittlesea's marketplace early in the morning, selecting men and their families to travel across the country for guaranteed mill work. And it was during this time that some of their family moved away, and Eliza met Hiram, who was stationed in Peterborough after returning from active service. They got married in January 1860, and this was quickly followed by the birth of their daughter, Ruth Sison, who was born on the 7th of April 1860 in Whittlesea, where her mother's family still had roots. By the time of the 1861 census, Hiram, Eliza and baby Ruth were living on Church Street in Peterborough, and he was still serving in the 57th Regiment of Foot and had not yet left the military, but he had achieved a promotion to corporal. By the end of the 1860s, after more than 2 decades of military service, Hiram Syson transitioned into civilian life. Around 1870 he secured employment with the London and North Western Railway, one of the most important railway companies of the Victorian era. He worked as a railway pointsman, a responsible role that required sharp attention to safety and the operation of track switches for passing trains. By the time of the 1871 census, they were living at Whitmore Station in Staffordshire, and this rural posting likely suited his disciplined, practical character, and the family settled into their new life. However, change was soon on the horizon. In late 1872, the local Board of Health in Burslem advertised a position for a hall-keeper at the recently expanded town hall. The Staffordshire Advertiser reported that 40 people applied for the role, but it was Hiram and Eliza who were chosen. His military background, experience as a caretaker, and proven reliability made him an ideal candidate. On the 7th of December 1872, the board officially appointed them to the post, offering a salary of £60 a year. The duties would have included overseeing the town hall, maintaining order, and assisting with public events, civic duties, and daily operations. The Sison family moved into accommodation provided at Burslem Town Hall. This move would soon set the stage for Hiram to make history. In the early 1870s, the Order of St. John in England was seeking a meaningful way to express its charitable ethos, guided by the motto, "For the benefit of mankind." One proposed initiative was the introduction of an ambulance service for the general public, particularly for use in industrial towns and mining areas, where workplace accidents were frequent and often fatal. However, this forward-thinking idea was initially met with resistance. In 1872, the Order consulted senior surgeons. These medical professionals advised that the logistical and clinical challenges of implementing such a service were far too great, leading the Order to shelve its plans temporarily. Despite the setback, momentum quietly continued behind the scenes, and by 1874 the Order revisited its ambulance scheme, this time drawing inspiration from the Franco-Prussian War, during which innovative wheeled litters had been used to transport wounded soldiers. 2 of these litters were purchased and shipped to England. One of these was assigned to Burslem, a town deeply rooted in the coal and pottery industries. The region was plagued by workplace injuries and lacked any formal emergency transport system. The decision to base one of the first trial ambulance services was not coincidental. It was made possible through the determined efforts of Colonel Shaw, a local advocate, and a committee that pledged to cover all maintenance and staffing costs. On the 3rd of June 1874, the Burslem Local Board of Health passed a formal resolution welcoming the ambulance and agreeing to house it at the town hall. Their statement read, "The board cheerfully undertakes to provide accommodation in the town hall for the ambulance litter, which has been provided for the town of Burslem by the Order of St. John of Jerusalem, and, on behalf of the inhabitants, thanks the Order for what they will feel assured will meet a great want in a district where mining and other accidents are prevalent." The responsibility for operating the new ambulance fell to Hiram Syson. With his military background, proven reliability, and first-hand medical experience as a hospital orderly during the Crimean War, he was an obvious choice. His official title was hall-keeper, but he now becomes something much more, the first man in England to manage and operate a civilian ambulance service. Hiram underwent voluntary training in the use of tourniquets and splints, long before the formal training of first aid ever existed. The ambulance litter itself was a 2-wheeled cart that could be pulled or pushed by hand, designed to safely carry patients to hospital while minimising their pain. When on duty, he wore a cloth armband bearing the badge of the Order of St. John, which marked his role in this experimental but vital new service, and on the 3rd of November 1874, his commitment was formally recognised when he was appointed a serving brother of the Order. He was only the second person in England to receive this honour, after the Order's caretaker in London. This appointment marked a historic moment. With Burslem as its base, Hiram Syson's operation became the first organised, trained, and publicly available ambulance service in the country, created for civilians, run locally, and built entirely on the goodwill of community and volunteerism. The first operational use of the Burslem ambulance service, and the beginning of a national movement, was recorded on the 9th of June 1874. Although that early call-out was not initially carried out by Hiram himself, the Sentinel later reported on a young man who had been transported to the infirmary using a common cart. The article made it clear that Hiram had been contacted and the new ambulance would have been used instead, suggesting that awareness of the new service was still developing amongst the public. As the local population became more familiar with the purpose of the two-wheeled litter stationed at the town hall, requests for Hiram's services increased. His training in applying splints and tourniquets allowed him to offer care that, while basic by today's standards, was revolutionary for its time. He operated the ambulance with care and dignity, treating patients not merely as casualties to be moved, but as individuals in need of respect and compassion. The Order of St. John's 1875 annual report documented 9 uses of the ambulance over a 12-month period, a small but significant start. The first official press report of its use came on the 23rd of November 1874. In this instance, Hiram had transported a woman who had broken a leg in 2 places to the North Staffordshire Infirmary. This event was covered in the Staffordshire Sentinel and marked the first public recognition of Hiram's pioneering role. The report from the Order highlighted Hiram's commitment. He has proved himself most zealous and efficient and has much pride in his connection with the Order. The chapter has recently awarded him a small gratuity. The Order also acknowledged that Hiram was voluntarily receiving further instructions in the application of splints and tourniquets, showing both his willingness to learn and his deep dedication to the role. The people of Burslem began to see Hiram not just as a town hall keeper, but as someone dependable in moments of crisis and pain, the one to call when accidents occurred in the mines, pot banks or streets. And slowly but surely, the image of the ambulance man became one that embodied compassion, professionalism, and local pride. In June 1875, the responsibility on Hiram's shoulders expanded once again when he was appointed superintendent of the Burslem, Longport and Cobridge Fire Brigade. His reputation for reliability, discipline, and calm under pressure made him the ideal choice to lead this vital public service. At a time when fires in a tightly packed industrial town could devastate entire streets or businesses, the role of fire superintendent carried great importance and public trust. Almost immediately after his appointment, Hiram was called into action. In August of that year, a woman tragically lost her life after a mattress caught fire. Hiram responded swiftly, arriving at the scene with the Burslem fire engine. Though his services were ultimately not required on this occasion, his quick reaction demonstrated the level of preparedness and urgency with which he approached his new responsibilities. Later that year, in November, Hiram once again demonstrated the versatility of his dual role, when a local man, William Fox, suffered a crushed ankle while travelling down Port Hill. He was taken to the nearest licensed premises for initial medical attention. Afterwards, Hiram transported him to his home in Tunstall using the ambulance litter. And this incident highlighted how his duties as both ambulance man and fire superintendent were often intertwined, as he provided emergency care and transport for those in need across multiple types of incidents. On the 30th of November 1875, in recognition of his growing responsibilities and continued dedication, the local board increased Hiram's salary by £15, a significant raise at the time. One board member, Mr. Tennant, spoke in praise of Hiram's expanding role and commended his reliability, suggesting that few others could manage the range of duties as effectively as he had. Just 10 days later, on the 10th of December 1875, Hiram was initiated into the Burslem Sutherland Lodge of Freemasons. His occupation was listed as town hall keeper, but by this point he had already become much more than a caretaker. He was a trusted civic figure, a leader in both fire and medical emergency services, and now a respected brother within the town's influential Masonic community. His inclusion in the Freemasons reflected not only his own status, but also the high regard in which he was held by his peers and the town's civic leaders. On the 6th of February 1876, he was once again called to the front lines of local emergency response. A serious fire broke out in the manufacturing premises situated behind the district bank in Burslem. It was discovered shortly before 9 o'clock in the evening, and without delay, he rallied the fire brigade and reached the site by 9:10. The fire brigade connected hoses to a hydrant in Market Square and worked swiftly to bring the fire under control, and the flames threatened to engulf nearby buildings, including the bank itself. But despite the severity of the fire, Hiram's leadership and tactical decision-making prevented disaster. As water began to douse the flames, he assessed the situation and determined that reinforcements from Hanley and Tunstall were not required. The blaze was finally subdued by mid-afternoon the following day, after several hours of intense work from the firemen under his command. A later report credited him with saving the surrounding buildings from destruction. In April 1876, a letter published in the Staffordshire Sentinel praised Burslem's innovative approach to emergency care and urged other towns in the Potteries to follow its lead. At Burslem there is an ambulance, which is frequently in use to take wounded persons to the infirmary. It was supplied, I believe, by the Order of St. John of Jerusalem. Mr. Sison is kindly disposed, attentive to his duties, civil and obliging, and any words of mine that can induce the good people of Burslem to requite him for his services, I shall be glad. I would at the same time suggest that each of the other towns in the Potteries obtain one of these ambulances. These public tributes, alongside the official recognition from the Order, reinforced Hiram's growing reputation as one of the town's most dedicated public servants. He'd become a dependable figure in the lives of the townspeople, not only as the keeper of the town hall and a firefighter, but also as the go-to man in times of injury or disaster. And on his 46th birthday, Hiram was honoured in a touching ceremony by the fire brigades of Burslem, Cobridge and Longport. The firemen presented him with an engraved address and a selection of beautifully crafted gifts, including a coloured and engraved glass goblet, a glass cigar holder, and a painted china teacup and saucer. The address, signed by over 40 firemen, praised his kind and gentlemanly bearing, firmness and discretion on all emergencies, and acknowledged his generous spirit and effective leadership. This presentation was not just a token of appreciation, it was a sincere expression of respect from the men who had worked under his guidance and had come to admire his dedication and humility. Decades later, in 2019, one of these very gifts, the cranberry glass goblet, resurfaced and was auctioned in Guernsey. Although how it got there, we'll never know. But by the end of the 1870s, Hiram Syson had become one of Burslem's most admired public figures, a man whose actions spoke louder than words, and whose legacy was already being celebrated in his own lifetime. But as the 1870s drew to a close, Hiram Syson, once a strong and stoic figure, began to suffer from a severe and painful illness. And though details of his condition remain unknown, it is clear that his health deteriorated significantly over the course of a year. Despite this, he never stepped back from his duties. He continued to oversee the town hall, operate the ambulance, and lead the fire brigade, even as he battled ongoing pain and fatigue. His dedication was unwavering. In fact, his final report to the Order of St. John, submitted only days before his death, noted that he had recently transported a crushed patient 5 miles using the ambulance litter. This commitment to others, even in his weakened state, defined his final year of life. And on Monday the 7th of June 1880, Hiram Syson died at the age of 47. His passing was met with widespread sadness across Burslem, and 4 days later, on the 11th of June, his funeral became a major civic event. The cortege included the mayor, members of the corporation, the fire brigade, Chief Superintendent Hill and Inspector German, sergeants and constables of the local police, and many townspeople. And their presence spoke volumes about the respect and gratitude Hiram had earned throughout his years of public service. The 1880 annual report of the Order of St. John paid tribute to his legacy. The serving brother Hiram Syson had devoted himself with the greatest interest to the duties devolving upon him in the conveyance of injured persons. In spite of a severe and painful illness extending over a period of 12 months, he did not relax his efforts to mitigate the pain of others, and his last report shows that his interest in his work continued to the last day of his life. Unfortunately, the Burslem ambulance station ceased operations following his death. Without his leadership and presence, the voluntary model could not easily continue, yet this was not the end of the movement, it was only the beginning. In 1881, just 1 year after his death, the Order of St. John formally established its ambulance department under the guidance of Surgeon Major William George Nicholas Manley, V.C. The first official framework for civilian ambulance services was put in place. By 1884, the Potteries Centre of the newly formed St John's Ambulance Association was established, and 3 years later, in 1887, the uniformed St John's Ambulance Brigade was formed. Fittingly, Burslem, the town where it all began, was home to one of its first corps. Hiram Syson had lived and died without seeking fame, but his example became the foundation upon which a national institution was built. He showed that ordinary people with training and compassion could save lives, a revolutionary idea in Victorian Britain, and one that would shape generations to come. After his death, his wife Eliza remained in Burslem for a few more years, continuing to let out rooms at their home in Portland Street, but eventually she relocated to Lancashire, where many of the members of the Timms family, including her parents and siblings, had moved years earlier to work in the cotton mills. There, she was reunited with her extended family and lived out the remainder of her life in quieter surroundings. Hiram's story is one of quiet revolution. In an age where few services existed for those injured in everyday life, he brought dignity, urgency and care to the people of Burslem. Drawing on his experience as a soldier and a hospital orderly, he stepped into a pioneering role that didn't yet have a name, and made it indispensable. As England's first known civilian ambulance man, he laid the foundations for a public service that would go on to save countless lives across the country. But Hiram was more than a historic first. He was a man who earned the service and admiration of his community through hard work, humility, and service. He became a local hero, not with grandeur, but with grit, whether responding to fires, tending to the wounded, or leading with a calm resolve. He showed that one determined individual could achieve with limited resources, but limitless heart. And his legacy lives on not only through the institutions that followed, the St John's Ambulance Association, the Brigade, and countless ambulance services nationwide, but also through the lives of those that he helped, the community that he protected, and the history that he helped to write. Today, as ambulances race to emergencies in towns and cities across the UK, their origins can be traced back to the town hall steps of Burslem, Stoke-on-Trent, where a man named Hiram Syson once carried the injured on a two-wheeled cart with courage, care, and the hope of a better way. May his name always be remembered as the first ambulance man. Well, thank you very much for listening, guys. I hope you enjoyed that one. I hope you've learned something. If you do enjoy what I write, you can head over to my website, which is theredhairedstokey.co.uk. You can support me by signing up to my newsletter. You can buy me a coffee, or, just even liking and sharing these posts on social media is fantastic. But thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time.